Balik po tayo sa Usapang Bayan at kasama pa rin natin ang Special Envoy, ang Senior Consultant to the Special Envoy to China, former Secretary Raffy Alunan. So, Raffy, I wanted to ask, the counterparts that you're talking to from the Chinese delegation, are they senior officials or are they also representatives of quasi-government agencies, or how is it?
Well, in my recent trip to Beijing last week with the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, we met, the highest official we met was the Vice Minister for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we met also with the heads of various think tanks related to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the military. We also met with the ASEAN-China Center, no. But for the most part, we were being hosted by diplomats, the diplomatic sector, no. Now, in the future, with President Ramos naman, President Ramos being for a former president and representative of President Digong, will likely meet very high government officials in China.
I see. In terms of meeting with these different people, how is the reaction towards the whole thing? Is it very cordial, very suspicious? How do they
Not
take
at
the whole
all.
thing?
In Hong Kong, it was very, very warm. It was nice and friendly. And when we got to, when I reached Beijing last week with PCFR, the first thing that the Vice Minister told us was Philippine-Chinese relations have turned the page. We've reached a turning point, and this augurs well for the future. So that paves the way for very good dialogues between President Ramos and his counterparts when we return, to China.
Sir, you mentioned about the ASEAN earlier. During the ASEAN summit, the leaders also expressed their growing concern over the assertive claims of China over the disputed territory. Do we have any plans to seek further help in addressing the situation?
Well, I think that's what the Department of Foreign Affairs is doing. They're constantly interacting with their counterparts in ASEAN. Because we need to have a strong voice in dealing with China. But we have to be very careful about that technique. It can be useful up to a point, because beyond that could be counterproductive for bilateral relations. No? So we're walking on eggshells there. From the standpoint of constructive engagement, I think we can work things out bilaterally. But from the standpoint of preventive diplomacy, I think we have to work with a consortium of nations.
Among the ASEAN member nations, who do you believe is mostly more sympathetic to us or very sympathetic to our situation, to the decision on the international arbitration? Which do you think we're closest to?
Well, in ASEAN, I think the one that quite understands our situation, because they're also in the same situation, is Vietnam. Among our defense partners, of course, the United States and Japan. And I'm very enthused at the response of Japan to help us build our credible deterrence. In fact, they've sent word that they're making themselves their weapon systems and their platforms available. No, but on the caveat, there's one caveat that we have to fix our, we have to strengthen our human resources, our mindsets, our processes, internal processes. Because, for example, what's the point of selling or giving equipment to us if we don't have a maintenance culture?
That's right.
Right. What's the point of working out contracts if we don't work
follow
out multi-funding process with Congress? No. How can we, for example, talk about joint operations if we don't train our people accordingly to to work with modern equipment and to understand how warfare is done in the 21st century. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, as well as building the proper infrastructure to host the capital assets that we will be buying. The airports, the hangars, the seaports, the warehousing, the basing, training facilities, all that have to be put in place. Radar systems. Yeah.
It seems that you have taken, quite a good look at all of these issues, no? And I was just wondering that after the 1-year exclusion period, no, for candidates, would you consider working for government on a secretary level or a cabinet position level, particularly on the national defense side?
Well, President Duterte and I had spoken about that early this year in Davao, and we have an understanding.
Okay. So I hope that understanding bears fruit as soon as possible, and of course we're ready to support you.
That's really up to the president at that time. Depends on the circumstances and conditions prevailing at the time. But thank you, George.
Sir, President Duterte imposed a deadline on the government's campaign against illegal drugs. Kayo rin po ba, do you have a specific timetable in resolving the dispute?
No, it's very hard to put a time frame here because we're dealing with man's imperfection, right? The best that we can do is promise to put it under control, right? I think that's the right word to use, no? Place things under control. You can never eliminate because man is imperfect, right? But my advice to government is before initiating operations against drug syndicates, crime syndicates, other crime syndicates, and the corrupt out there in society, he has to clean house first. House cleaning is very important because government is heavily infiltrated. Pinaplano pa lang, alam na ng kabila, alam na ng kalaban kung anong gagawin, ano? So it's very easy to telegraph. Kaya't this is where the lead duck comes in, the Executive Legislative Council, Development Council, where they have to collaborate in identifying key legislation, priority legislation to help the executive carry out its programs. Number one, in terms of right-sizing the bureaucracy, we're talking about the national government, GOCCs, and the local government, including our constitutional bodies. Okay. Number two, and most important, the criminal justice system. Okay. Because if we don't regain the trust and confidence of the people, then nothing is going to work, right? Third, LEDAC has to invest in credible deterrence. Okay. Very, very, very important. Number four, they have to focus on amending the Constitution. Because the Constitution needs fine-tuning, right? We have to open our doors to investments, and there are some provisions in the Constitution that bars that. And there might be a need for us to fine-tune also certain provisions of the Constitution other than the economic provisions. Like, for example, our so-called independent foreign policy. In the 20th century, because of nationalism, independent foreign policy was the byword, right? But today, we are a globalized world. We are interdependent. So our foreign policy must be interdependent, right? So we need to have that paradigm shift. We need to look at these things squarely and adjust our constitution to fit current times and with a long-term view. Okay? So there are priorities that need to be addressed by LEDAC. And I hope that the President sees these things in the same way, because it's at this point, it looks like he's putting the cart before the horse. No, he's already gigil na gigil kasi gigil na gigil to serve the people, to do something, because the people have been waiting for years, no, for results, no. Ang problema is that kulang siya sa human resources that can be relied upon. Kasi marami pa mga shall we say, tulisan sa loob.
Self-serving people.
Self-serving people, yeah. So he has to clean up.
But sir, are you optimistic that the issue will be settled before President Duterte steps down from office?
Well, that depends kasi, you know, every member of the cabinet and every head of, let's say, the GOCCs, constitutional bodies, and the local government units, no, they have to serve as his bastoneros. They have to be aligned in terms of vision and direction, ano? And that calls for leadership, all right? He has to exercise leadership in that way. He cannot just say that, you know, I'll do this without harnessing that or mobilizing that army, you know, within the government. Otherwise, all his good intentions and his courage, you know, he's heroic, basically.
Yes.
All that will fall by the wayside, no? So it has to be smart leadership.
Right. I just have a question with respect to what you're doing for the negotiations right now. Are you provided with President Ramos some staff to help you do some research, or this is all a one-man show type of thing?
No. We have we do our own research.
Yes.
You know, thank God for the information age. It's easy for us to research even on our own. No.
So you really don't have any staff to help you out?
Oh
with?
no, we touch base with the DFA. We touch
I
base
see.
with the National Security
Ad hoc
Agency.
lang. Ad hoc lang.
Well, we're a temporary.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we're not
An office.
we're not an office. We're not an agency, right? So we're operating on an ad hoc basis.
Right.
But we have
The
the
resources
resources of
available.
government available
I
to
see.
us.
I see. So we're almost at the end of our program, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah.
Maybe we can deliver a few words to our audience that you might want to relate to them.
Well, this much I can say, and I'd like to take off from my campaign slogan. You know, when I campaigned, the motto I used was Matino and Mahusay, because this is what we drew up in the DILG during my time. For good government to set in, the people in government must be both Matino and Mahusay. We must always choose to do the right things, and then we must be able to do things the right way. Okay. Now, that got us during my time to clean house. We started removing the mediocre and the scalawags, no? And we called it right-sizing the bureaucracy. And the approach that we took was early retirement. Okay. But that was limited to my department at that time. The other departments needed goading. I think based on the lessons that we learned then, this early, since President Digong is just 80 days into his presidency, he can adjust immediately at this point and focus on general house cleaning to include the criminal justice system, so that his drive, his campaigns against drugs, crime, corruption, and to improve the quality of professionalism in government, no, would succeed in the long run. So it's important for us to adopt the mentality of being Matino and Mahusay, not just in government but also in society. If society were to behave responsibly on a daily basis, we would lift a lot of the burden that's now on the shoulders of the government based on the lawlessness of society. Yung pasaway. If we just do things the right way and choose to do the right things, we would have contributed a lot to law and order, no? Which is the main problem that we face today.
Right.
So, maging matino at mahusay and be of help to your government.
At dyan po nagtatapos ang ating programa ngayong gabi dito sa Usapang Bayan. Kasama natin si Senior Consultant to the Special Envoy to China, Mr. Secretary Raffy Alunan.
Maaari niyo po kaming i-follow sa Twitter at GNN Usapang Bayan at sundan ang aming Facebook page. Ako po si Rach Marquez.
At ako po si George Chua. Samahan niyo po kami dito sa mga susunod nating talakayan sa Usapang Bayan.